So let me start by giving you some quick context, because I didn't want us going into the conversation blind. There is so much out there in the cultural miasma that surrounds us around working women in general, not just in this industry, but in general. So we have examples like Anne-Marie Slaughter, who published this really interesting article in The Atlantic about why women still can't have it all. Her point was like, you know what, this dream you've been sold, this pipe dream that you can work and have a family is just that, a pipe dream. Guess what, you can't have it all. She talked a lot about how she in her career basically had to step back at various intervals, and that it was really through the luxury of being able to do that, working as an academic sometimes and having a lot of support, that she was able to pull this whole balancing act together. Another great example that's out there is Marisa Mayer, or Mayer, actually, I don't know how you say her name, but she was Google's first female engineer, so a real trendsetter. She became president of Yahoo in July 2012 and created this like weird discussion, because on the one hand, she was nursing when she started, and she built like a little nursery for her infant right next to her cool little CEO office. So what a model for working women. On the other hand, she completely changed Yahoo's rules around telecommunication and people working remotely. So a lot of other working women suddenly had to leave their kids at home and come trekking into the office all the time. So weird cultural debates there. And of course, probably the biggest trendsetter and conversation starter in this arena is Sheryl Sandberg's book called Lean In. She's the COO of Facebook, and she's sort of made it a cause to go around talking about issues of executive women working, and what does it mean? In what ways do we hold ourselves back? In what ways does culture still hold us back? And how can we lean in better? Great context and great other sources for you to read as you think about these issues. I also took a moment, like thinking about the cultural setting, to just do a quick Google search, Google images of working women, and I came up with like 3 general categories. And in the upper side, the upper left on your screen, you have working women who ignore their children. So that's one possibility for your own personal narrative. In the lower left, you have working woman as beauty queen. On the lower right, you have angry woman. And I don't even know what's going on with this Newsweek cover. The fantasy life of working women. Why surrender is a feminist dream. Who knew? So, you know, these are sort of funny examples, but I would say out of the hundreds that come up when you do a Google image, most of them, other than the stick figures, like fell into a bundle like this. So you can see how like our culture at this moment, no matter what kind of job you have, is very conflicted about what it means to have women having really strong executive careers. And these are like the choices. You always feel as a working woman, I think, that either you're ignoring your child, or you're screaming, or you're trying to be the beauty queen, and it's like you only have so many narratives you can apply to yourself, because it's kind of preset. Of course, the data is compelling as well. So of the Fortune 500 companies in the US, only 3.8% are female. That's 19 people. And even if you are lucky enough to make it to the CEO level, male CEOs on average earn $11.9 million a year, whereas female CEOs earn $3.8 million. So it's not like once you hit through that glass ceiling, suddenly your pay is going to be equitable. In fact, even if you become CEO, there's still discrepancy in terms of gender. And to reflect back for a moment on our own industry particularly, this is certainly true in medical technology. This is some data. The top bar chart is from the Women in Engineering Literature Review. And how many women are getting bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees. So a lot of data there, but the blue lines are men, and no surprise, the pinky lines are women. So obviously way fewer women are getting degrees in engineering. MD&I, Heather Thompson in the audience, the editor, does a salary survey every year. One of the data points we collect is the discrepancy in salary between women and men in this industry. So women on average making $133,000 a year, and men on average making $166,000 a year. So the issues we're talking about are ripe in this industry. So that's the context I wanted to provide. I'm going to go back to who's who, so you can keep who's who in your mind, and I'm going to ask our panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves.
My name is Nancy Singer, and I have my own company. I'm the president of Compliance Alliance, but I want to tell you a little bit about my background and how I got here. I started out, I went to Cornell University, and I graduated back in 1970. Did anyone graduate back in 1970? Not a lot. Okay, anyone born in 1970? Not a lot. A couple of you, you're around. Okay, well, when I went to college, you could either be a school teacher, if you're a woman, you could be a school teacher or a nurse. And I didn't like sick people, so I wasn't going to be a nurse. But I was a school teacher, and I was a school teacher in a very bad part of New York City. And I did that for a while, and I decided that this really wasn't for me. So I lasted out the year, and then I went off and I joined the Navy. And I became a woman naval officer in Pensacola, Florida. And I really think I was joined the Navy probably to get married, because I figured it was the Vietnam War, and where were the good men? And they were all, the really good men went to the Navy, because in the Navy, you were not going to get shot at. You'd be on a ship. Well, I stayed in the Navy, active duty, for 2 years, but where I was in the Navy, I was the only woman on the whole base. They were all Navy pilots. And I didn't want to marry someone who was going to be a pilot and land on a ship. That didn't seem like a good idea. So then I went to law school. And I was a lawyer, and when I graduated from law school, I got a job with the Department of Justice. And I was a federal prosecutor. And I did that for 4 years. And then I criminally prosecuted 7 cases. I was successful. And then I changed sides. I went into a law firm, and I defended those people I used to prosecute. I figured they needed help, and I could help them. I then went to a trade association, and I was their FDA counsel, and that was really fun. And I also did all their education. I built an educational organization for them. And then I was the general counsel of a company, a drug and device company, and I looked at their documents and I thought, oh my word, if I was suing them, I could make these people look really guilty. They were perfectly fine people. So I created a course, Dangerous Documents, Avoiding Landmines in Your Records and Emails. And now I teach my course to companies, and I teach it to the government and the FDA and anybody who wants to find out. So that's what I do.
Hi, I'm Sally Shankland. I'm the CEO of UBM Connect, and to be clear, I'm not a $3.8 million CEO. For my colleagues who are here who are going to hit me up for a loan after this. But UBM Connect is a company that includes 3 businesses, including UBM Canon, which puts on this event. I've been working in medical technology in some way, shape, or form since 1988. When I started working in the radiology space in information for radiologists about medical technology and advances therein. So I've been in the same company since 1988 in a succession of positions. I started out in an entry-level position in marketing. In the time I've been here, I've raised 2, 4, or 6 children, depending on how you count. So 2 of my own, 2 stepchildren, and 2 canines. So you can see how I get to 6 there. It's been very, very interesting, and I think the environment that I've worked in, I'm very fortunate to have been in a public company that is one that is very much a meritocracy and is supportive of people who work hard and work smart and are successful regardless of gender. So, that's what's made it possible for me to be in the position I'm in now and have relatively happy, well-adjusted, sane kids, depending on what day you ask me. So that's my story.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Joanna Arabaran, and I am a program manager at Venture Medical right now. I started out, I went to engineering school at RPI, where the ratio was 6 men to 1 woman. So I knew off the bat I was getting into a field that was very male dominated. I went through a couple technical positions. Really started out, I was actually president of the school, so I ended up really striving early on in my career, as well as my first job. I went through a leadership rotation program. So very, sort of the storyline of in the beginning of my career and in the beginning striving very hard, and then kind of getting off the path for a little bit. They're now 7-year-old twins, but I took 3 years off when they came along. And one of the things that I realized was I am now working part-time, which is a fantastic balance. Because I worked hard in the beginning of my career and because I had this drive, even though I got off of that trajectory and that I'm going to make it to the top. It still doesn't mean that I'm not successful. I consider myself successful because I'm able to, I've run, gosh, almost about 50 projects now over the last couple of years, and I like my kids. I feel like they like having me around too. So not that, not that you're breaking through any glass ceilings, but I think in my experience, what's worked best for me is the balance in finding both a company and a culture that supports the ability to have both a foot in the working world as well as a foot in the home world. So that's been my experience so far. What I do like too is there's still time. That experience might change as well, but that's my experience so far.
Hello, my name is Allie Reilly. I'm an industrial designer and design researcher, and I'm very proud to be a part of this conversation today because I am just starting out my career. I've been working for a few years with Philips Medisize, and starting off with, while I was in school, in my engineering and design courses, it was very male-dominated, and even now, today, where I'm working, I work with 4 male designers and a lot of male engineers and people out on the manufacturing floor as well. So I'm very happy to be a part of this conversation, and I'm glad that it's happening here.
Thank you. Thanks. So thanks all for telling us a little bit about your own story. I should be on this mic, I think. Let's start the conversation with an example from Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. A big part of the conversation that she has there is giving examples of some of the ways that women get in their own way as they try to proceed through this mess of becoming, potentially mothers or not mothers and working in an unfair environment. So do you have examples of people you've seen in your own life, or maybe things you've done yourself, that are examples where you've sort of unthinkingly leaned back or taken yourself out of the game in ways that you didn't actually intend to do?
I guess I can start. One of the things that I ended up doing was early on in my career, we decided to put our eggs in my husband's basket. So I got off the path. I ended up leaning back. Instead of pushing forward and continuing on the path, we made the choice for me to step back. That being said, in hindsight, I wouldn't change anything. But I think the culture is in these conversations that we're having now, bring back that I might not have had to get off the path. I might have been able to talk to my boss. I might have been able to try some different things. But in my experience, that's one time where I've taken a step back. But I have also continued to work hard and continue to show, even though I'm not on the path or leaned back at that time, it doesn't mean that you're off. That you're not. You can still perform. So
there's certainly a difference between the conscious decision it seems like you made to be home when your kids were little, and the kind of unconscious assumptions that people make. Well, I'll have to quit.
Oh yeah, this is when we got married. I didn't have kids yet, so I was getting myself off the path when even before they came along. So it was like I said, it's been a great experience. But perhaps if I had listened earlier, I might not have had to take that step back.
Is there another story?
Yeah, on a slightly different track, I think that what I see a lot, what I've seen in myself and what I see in other women, is that we tend to be doers, right? We tend to be doers in our home, and we often are doers in the workplace. And I sometimes see women saying, well, I have to make sure everything works out right, and I have to make sure all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. And we get so busy being the doers that we stop being the decision makers, or we say, well, I'm willing to let somebody else make the decisions. I'm too busy, right? I'm too busy executing somebody else's decisions. And I do see that a lot. We're the doers at home, often, not always, but often, and we're often the doers in the workplace. So I do see that that's one way where women hold themselves back. That I have held myself back in the past, where we're so busy on making sure that everything gets done the way it's supposed to, that we don't step back and think strategically. And I do hear that a lot about women. Oh, well, she can't be promoted because she's not a strategic thinker. Well, she's the one who's getting stuff done, the stuff that the strategic thinkers want and need to have done. So, I would encourage all the women and the men to think about that a little bit differently and think about, well, are we getting so busy doing things that we're not thinking about things strategically and what the right things to do are?
Thank you.
At the beginning of my career, I was the only woman on the base, being in the Navy, and so I tried very hard to fit in, as Sheryl Sandberg, not to be the woman, just to be one of the guys, not to really excel, but to fit in. And it worked fine. I did fine as a fitness report, but I was very careful not to show everyone that I was a woman. I then went to a law firm, and I was the only woman in the law firm, and so I tried to do the same thing. And I tried to not be aggressive, just do that. When I got into environments where when I went to the trade association, it was a third women, and that was much easier. If you have at least a third, you're not the girl or the woman, and then I could really express myself and be as aggressive or assertive as I wanted, and it was fun.
Thank you. Allie, did you want to comment?
I guess an example of where I've seen women leaning back instead of leaning in, just in my short amount of experience, when we have new engineers or new interns that come in, actually just the other day, I would have seen them actually leaning back, not physically sitting at the table. They're sitting off to the side, not necessarily speaking up in the meeting or not necessarily volunteering to lead the meeting or lead the project. And even at some more high-level engineers, a lot of women aren't necessarily working together, so maybe they're not leaning into the conversation together and letting a lot of the males take that role.
Great. I'm going to hand this one back to you. And maybe you can start sharing your experience with what you've been through. In everyone's career, there's a moment where you have to step up and be more assertive, or what might get read as bitchy in some work environments, right? And you have to have a certain amount of courage or confidence to do that. So can you give us an example of a time where you did press the limit and how you finessed it?
Well, I did. When in the law firm, we had a wonderful law firm, but our law firm was not paying as well as the highest rated law firms in the city, and we considered ourselves to be the highest rated law firm. So all of the men associates decided that they would complain to the partners and complain and just say, we want more money. And I was thrilled to have the job, so I didn't really want to be part of that. So I decided I would take another strategy, and my strategy was they were going to hire someone from a lawyer from the government. And I said, when you go out and hire that lawyer from the government, if you give them our salary survey, if you tell them what we're making, the word will get out, and we're not going to keep it that we're paying our people less, and the clients will think our work is not as good. So when you hire this person, you need to raise the salaries because it's for your own good. Well, it kind of backfired to me because they did pay this gentleman more, but they paid him more than me, and then I would have to step back. Well, this was a trying moment, so what was I going to do? So I said to them, this is not right. You can't take someone who graduated the same year as me and pay them more and make me step back for your benefit. And so what they did is they gave me the raise up to him, but they were very angry. It was a $10,000 differential, and they gave me the money, and I didn't like everybody being mad at me. So I said, there was one partner who would never let me buy books for the library, and I'd always have to go to the library. So I said to them, I don't want the money this year. What I want you to do is let's buy books. Let's use it for the good of the law firm, and we'll buy books. Well, they laughed and said, we're not going to buy books. But I got my books, I got the money, and I got the same amount as the gentleman that we were hired. So it was kind of a win-win all around.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and all of the data, and I'm sure that most of you are familiar with this and have seen it, which I think is very interesting, is that success and likability correlate very negatively for women and very positively for men. So, by definition, if you're a successful woman, the deck is kind of stacked against you, again, in terms of getting people to like you. You're going to have to work much harder at it. And I think for me, the real turning point was realizing that actually being respected mattered much more to me than being liked. And that's something that women who want to be successful have to come to terms with. Because the bottom line is, if you're successful, the tendency that men and women are going to have it's going to be, the natural tendency is to like you a little bit less. And I think that the trade-off of accepting that maybe you're not going to be everybody's best friend and you're not going to be universally loved, but you are going to be universally respected. Once you can come to terms with that and accept that, it makes a really significant difference in terms of your ability to be successful going forward. How I try to mitigate that, because of course, I don't like it when anybody uses the B word about me, right? No woman does, and we've all heard it. What I've tried to do to mitigate that is to use humor whenever possible, because I do think it really helps diffuse potentially tense situations a great deal. And the other thing that I think is really important is not to sweep stuff under the rug, right? So if something happens that is offensive in some way or bothersome or is derogatory to somebody on your team, it's really important to speak up about it. And I think the key lesson there is separating intent from impact, right? So a really good way to approach people is to say, look, I know it wasn't your intent to communicate X or say X, but your impact was that. So I just need to make you aware of that, right? Don't sweep stuff under the rug. Don't let it just wash over you. You're doing yourself a disservice every single time you do that, whether it's you personally or something that has nothing to do with gender. But when you see something happening that's wrong or is offensive or belittling to somebody, it's really, really critical to take that personally and speak up about it.
Thank you. I think one of the other things is to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. I think one of the things that I used to be intimidated with, or I used to shortchange myself, or I would already run through all the scenarios and decide that, hey, I already know, I've already figured it out, I'm not going to ask the question. And what I found is just asking the question brings up a lot of good debate and a lot of good conversations. A lot of times, women will not ask the question, or will assume that, their answer is going to be no, and so we won't even start down that path. And you don't know where that path is going to lead. You don't know what the answer is going to be. You don't know how you're going to catch that person that day. So by not asking the question, a lot of times that's one of the biggest disservices, and something that I've learned. Go ahead and ask the question. You might not get the answer you want, but you might get something better as well.
I think a time where I had to do something that felt like it was unfeminine was just leading a client brainstorm for a company, and this is something that I've done many times now. But starting off with my internship, I would step in front of a group of usually all male members, and a lot of times they would be engineers, sometimes executives from the customer or from our company. So it was a little intimidating at first, and I felt like I kind of had to prove myself. But I think now when I go into those meetings, I'm a lot more confident and able to bring all of their visions together. So I think it's a lot more of a collaborative environment, and I feel more comfortable. And then I think another example, too, that Sally mentioned about sweeping things under the rug is just there was a time where I wanted to lead a project, lead the project team from the design side. And my coworker had a reaction that seemed unfavorable and just kind of rude. So I definitely brought that up, and I just said, well, I don't know if he doesn't think I can do it or if he's doubting based on my lack of experience, but I brought it up and started a conversation. So definitely need to do that when it happens.
An example that Sheryl Sandberg brings up in her book is when she goes to Facebook, she's offered the position, and her first impulse is just to take the money that's offered. And her brother and please tell me it's not her husband, I actually forget. No, her husband and her brother, of course. See, are you crazy? No man would take the job without negotiating. It's not how you do in Silicon Valley. That's just the beginning of the game. You're being foolish. So she goes in and she asks for more money, but interestingly, she does so in a sort of purposefully feminine way. So she doesn't say, I'm worth more money because she's concerned about how it will be perceived. She plays a game, sort of, where she says, I am aware that women tend not to ask for money. So because of my awareness of this history, I'm going to go ahead and ask for more money. So I'm interested in that, like, self-aware gaming, like playing the cards you're dealt consciously. And I'm interested in your response to that story or anecdotes you have along those lines.
Well, I don't negotiate. I mean, in my company, I've had my company for 9 years, and I love my company, and I work with lots of people. And I don't negotiate. What I always do is I decide what is really fair. Whatever I'm doing, what is really fair, what position would I want if I gave it to them, and then I offer the other party that amount of money that I want, which is fair, usually split it down the middle or whatever. And no one has ever said they wouldn't take it because I thought it was right. So that's just the way I have lived my life.
Yeah, I mean, I think another really, really, really great and interesting question, right? Because it does seem to me that women often negotiate in ways that are different from men, but I don't think it's necessarily gender-driven. I think that there are ways in which we're starting to communicate as a society that women are bringing to the workplace that are actually really helpful to sort of uplifting business everywhere. And by that I mean my view is always, if I'm having a dispute or debate or discussion with someone, to really get to understand their side, right? To ask a lot of questions. So not just to argue my position, but to truly try to understand where the person I'm in a debate with is coming from. And that helps resolve the debate. And you could say that that's a sort of traditionally female way of approaching the problem, to not head into direct conflict, but to start to really try to understand the other side. But I think that, in a world where there's so much conflict that, our government in this country is semi in paralysis because the two sides can't talk to each other and can't understand each other, that ability to actually try to understand, deeply understand, how somebody who feels differently from you in a conflict or situation is really, really valuable to our very survival as a species. So I don't know whether I would call that a female skill per se, but I do think it's something that is incredibly important for us and will increase and change as we move forward. So.
No, I agree, Sally. No, and I think one of the areas where I see sometimes it's more of a female characteristic to be passive-aggressive. And I see a lot of times you'll see that in meetings as well. You'll see, and I think that's good. I think some of it is good because you do need a softer side. But then again, that is more of a female description to be more of a passive-aggressive negotiator and things like that. But again, I think it's okay to be, again, I kind of go back to asking the question. It's more of an aggressive, but I wouldn't call that aggressive. It's just being more, I guess it is more aggressive, just being more forceful and putting yourself out there. So I think you can have the soft characteristics in them as well as just stepping up on the harder characteristics as well. And not selling yourself short, knowing your point of view and what you want to bring and what you can bring to the table. And just presenting that.
And this area isn't something that I've had direct experience with, but it's inspiring to think about as I move forward, just having more knowledge about how to be more direct. If you think it's appropriate to ask for a promotion or negotiate a deal with a new company, I think that's something that I'll definitely take to heart in the future.
Great. I'm going to jump to the topic of not everybody at all moments wants to or should give everything to their career. If we're talking about a balancing act here, you can't always lean left. Sometimes you lean right. Sometimes you lean forward. Sometimes you lean back. When I first went back to work after my son was born, I had a career consultant work with me because I was being so mean to everybody around me who I was working with because I felt so much pressure. I don't have time in the day. The nanny is going to leave. So just get to the point. And she said you have to realize that work-life balance is never actually balance. Like the nature of balance is more like yoga. Like it's like being on a bus. So sometimes you lean in, sometimes you lean back. So I'm curious about incidences in your own life or maybe in other women's lives that you know who decided like, you know what, this is not the time for me to lean into my career. It's time for me to lean into a hobby or lean into my health or something else. In what ways have you sought a dynamic balance?
So the remark there was, I'm not the most balanced, so somebody else start. So, I mean, I agree that the sort of wobble board is a great analogy, right? And you know, it sort of does come to the question of can you have it all? And, you know, I think the answer is clearly you can't, right? If you want your pillowcases to match, you're going to be the one making the bed every single day, right? There are things you have to let go of is the bottom line. And on the other hand, I think that there is a huge amount of benefit to people's careers and their performance as professionals that results from having balance. And I think that's one of the huge benefits that women have if they're mothers, because they learn to develop a certain amount of balance. They learn that not everything has to be perfect. Some things have to be perfect and some things have to be just pretty good. Right? And learning that is tremendously valuable and tremendously insightful. And also, you know, a lot of neuroscience shows that you actually can't concentrate on anything for more than 90 minutes effectively. After that, you need to take a little break and think about something else. So, you know, if that something else is, oh, I forgot to call the pediatrician, that's actually good for your work performance. And, you know, I think that people of all genders need to find ways to get a little bit of balance in their lives and have that wobble board a little bit where they lean in and lean out, because it'll make them more effective in their times when they lean in.
Yeah. I don't think, you know, women or men or stay-at-home moms or full-time working moms or part-time, I don't think anybody has balance. And if they do, let me know, because I just don't think it's out there. That being said, I do think that when you're presented with the wobbles, you get opportunities. So when my husband has to pick up the kids, when I have to do something, you know, whenever we have to try to do something different, we all learn and we all grow from that. And it's better on everybody. It provides more insight and more compassion. You end up, you walk in somebody else's shoes. You know, when you are wobbling, you do get a chance to step into somebody else's space and see what that would be like. And it also helps you understand, like, you know, sometimes you'll go into something and be like, wow, I don't want to do that. You know, remind me, you know, I will, you know, have somebody or figure out some way in my life to not have to do that. And you also see areas that you like and that you see, I want to learn more about that. I want to, you know, I enjoy cooking. So I want to develop that more. And again, you're presented with those different opportunities when you are wobbling. And the idea is to take a step back and not fall down or not get overwhelmed. And as like you were saying too, when when you're first back and you're cutting everything short, I've definitely had that experience as well. But yeah, just trying to take everything in and learn from it and learn from the experience of it. I think is definitely a key, because you can't have it all. And your kids are going to go to school with their hair in 3 braids, and it's going to be messy, and they're going to, you know, forget their backpacks and not have their lunch. And it's not perfect, but it's okay. Yeah, it happens. It absolutely happens. So yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, definitely the experiences about being able to take a break and while you're at work and be able to look away from the computer for a few minutes, but also for me, something that helps being more focused at work or leaning in more at work is doing other hobbies outside of work, whether it's working on an art project or cooking or trying to exercise more. I think that helps you lean in more at work, but also lean in outside. I don't have children yet, but I spend a lot of time with the rest of my family, and so being able to lean in outside of work with my family helps a lot too.
Well, as a child who had a mother when I was young, we had financial reverses, and my mother had to go back to work. And so she went back to school, and then she went to college and became the dean of the college. But because she had to do that, we were all a team. And we all were very supportive and understanding because she had to be working. And so we helped her. So for all the people in the audience who feel guilty that you're working really hard, we watched her study, and education was very important. So everyone in my family is a doctor or a lawyer because school was important, and she went to school and we went to school. And so by watching your mothers working really hard, it kind of motivates the kids. So a little advice there.
Thank you to all our panelists for sharing your stories and being willing to talk about it.